Yeah, all right. So we'll start with Bryan, and he'll kick off a little bit about Axiom and what he's doing here.
Great, thank you. Welcome everyone. Bryan Caplin, General Manager and VP of Sales here at Axiom. With Axiom for 7 years now. Spent about 10 years at the CEB, formerly Corporate Executive Board, for those of you who know them. And just a little bit about Axiom, if you're not familiar with us, and many probably aren't. We were founded in 2000 with a pretty bold mission to transform the legal industry, an industry that hasn't changed much in the last 100 years. Since that time, we've now become the world's largest non-traditional provider of legal services. We're over 1,500 employees today. That's across 16 offices, 3 continents, and 5 delivery centers where a lot of people work from. So we're excited that you're here today in our space. Please check it out. We encourage you to walk around afterwards. We've got lots of members of our sales team here, outside sales, our sales development team, our recruitment team as well. If you want to learn a little bit more about what we're doing here at Axiom, we'd love to share that with you. But we're really excited to tell the story today about how we scaled our sales development team, which Kyle is going to talk about shortly. This is a team that didn't exist 18 months ago. Kyle was employee number 1 within sales development, and we've scaled that to 20 globally now in 18 months. So we're excited to tell you about what we learned along the way, how we got there, and how it's going. So thank you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, really quickly, those of you in the last row, or those of you huddled over there, can you hear us? Loud.
Loud.
Okay, I thought, because you have this nice AC unit over there. So if you want to fill in on a couple of the chairs, if you're going to stay the whole time, and if you have to jet out early, there are a couple chairs in the front. Just throw it out there again. All right, and Kyle.
All right. I'm really excited to tell our story and talk about what we think are the key ingredients that make for a winning SDR or lead gen team. But I'm going to start with a little bit of context. Here at Axiom, we totally subscribe to the specialized sales model. Right? Aaron Ross in Predictable Revenue really championed or publicized this idea. And that book, Predictable Revenue, has become a program of sorts for us and other sales organizations as they scale. And briefly, the idea is to develop teams of specialists at each stage in the sales funnel, at each stage of the sales cycle, as opposed to the jack-of-all-trades salesperson who follows leads from origination to closing business, even post-close customer success. Specialized teams have clear focus and responsibilities at each stage, and therefore, with the expertise, they become more productive. And it's also easier to measure, and it's easier to report with specialized teams, which all sounds great. You guys probably will understand as you scale, you specialize, you become more productive. But 18 months ago, we really weren't a specialized sales organization. And we started that plunge into specialization at the top of the sales funnel with lead gen or with sales development. And it started with me. When I started in that role, I was the only one full-time focused on building pipeline, in our case, scheduling meetings. We built a team from myself to a team of 3 people that focused on our local New York market. And as Bryan mentioned, fast forward to today, we're 20 people globally. 12 of those people, and soon to be 15, sit here in New York and support the entirety of our East Coast operations, Atlanta, DC, Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and soon to be Toronto, which I'm really excited about. So it's been a fun ride. It's been a crash course on scaling an SDR team.
Nice. So are there any other specific benefits that you want to point out? Or are we ready to dive into some of the themes?
Sure. There's a few reasons why you want to invest the time and invest the money, and especially putting that SDR team at the top of your funnel. The first thing is the obvious one. When people are just focused on sales development or just focused on building pipeline, they become expert, right? So when they're reaching out to clients via email, the person that does that all day, every day is going to get really good at email, right? Through A/B testing, what works. Similarly, on the phone, right? If the person who's consistently calling upon clients is going to become more confident, he's going to become, or she's going to become attuned to what objections she'll handle, what are the best call windows, etc. But that expertise, I don't even think is the most impactful or the fundamental biggest reason why you want to invest in SDR. It's about building consistency of your pipeline. And so if you are, say you're a startup and you hire your first salesperson, right? And that salesperson starts by identifying 100 people that could derive some value from a service, 100 prospects. Of the 100, he emails, he calls, he's persistent, he stays on them. 10 eventually agree to take a meeting. Meets with the 10 people. Of the 10, 5 of those might want to have follow-up conversations. And then of the 5, maybe 2 of them he can close. Revenue in the door, everyone celebrates, go to happy hour. But then we come to work the next day and there's nothing in the hopper, right? No pipeline. An SDR team or a Legion team solves for that problem, right? Because they're consistently focused on scheduling meetings or qualifying opportunities, thus building that consistent pipeline. Therefore, your outside sales, your AEs are consistently focused on closing, and therefore that consistent pipeline amounts to predictable revenue. And then if you scale the pipeline at the top of the sales funnel, you can accelerate your revenue growth, right? So the consistency of the pipeline is one of the major impacts. And then the third thing is, and this is one of my favorite parts about my job and about sales development, is the SDR team is your incubator for talent for tomorrow. It's the farm lead for your future sales leaders, marketing leaders, business development leaders. And I really think it's the best place to cut your teeth as you enter one of those roles. Why? Because the skills that you learn in lead gen or in sales development are going to drive you as on your trajectory through the rest of your career. For instance, the importance of concise communication, right? Confidence on the phone, tenacity, an orientation towards what's in it for the client and why should they care. We have an executive currently at Axiom, and he started his career at CEB where Bryan's from, and an SDR type role. And he recently emailed someone on my team with that same lesson, that same message. Here are the skills I developed as an SDR, and here's how they've driven me going forward. So that's one of my favorite parts about the job. It's the incubator for talent in the future.
Yeah, I've started thinking about it. We're building people, right? We're not really sales development. We're people development. In a funny way, we're an extension off of a recruiting team, because it's where most of the entry level or green talent is coming in. So, and they go in a lot of different places within organizations. They don't all end up as AEs. So we're going to go into a lot more detail on different pieces that Kyle touched on, and we're going to bucket this into themes so you'll understand the structure. So we're going to dive into strategy of setting goals. So how did you think about setting goals, and what are those based on? Some people base them on meetings. Some people base them on qualified opportunities. What about you guys?
Yeah. So it's probably going to be one or the other, and one or the other being you're going to goal your team on setting introductory meetings or introductory demos, or on qualified opportunities. And that distinction is probably going to turn on how mature your market is for your service and how educated the marketplace is about your service. Tish Bertuzzi wrote a book, I think last year, it's called SDR Playbook.
The sales development playbook.
Yeah.
It's the messiest book that I own.
That's one on the subject.
Yeah.
And she has a useful example. She compares the markets for CRM versus the market for predictive lead scoring. Everyone in this room probably is familiar with CRM, at least I hope you are. Most of you probably have Salesforce, right? We actually recently migrated to Salesforce. If a SDR from a different CRM was to schedule a meeting with Bryan, VP of Sales, and send account exec to meet with Bryan, it's going to be a total waste of the AE's time. We're not going to buy in the next calendar year. We just signed up for Salesforce. We probably have future renewal dates, but we're totally educated about that product, right? We know CRMs. Predictive lead scoring, on the other hand, a lot of people in this room might not know what it is. You might not know if it adds value to your business. I personally am not a big believer. An SDR for that type of company is going to have to really educate the marketplace on what this is and why it's worth their time to learn about. In that instance, instead of just looking for qualified opportunities, They should be scheduling meetings full steam ahead. So long as the SDR is focused on the right company, the right person within that company, and there's some hypothesis as to we can solve some type of pain they have or we can add value, they should schedule as many meetings as possible and then get out of the way. So I think that distinction of if it's qualified opportunities versus introductory meetings or demos is really about how educated the marketplace is. So one other thing I would add is if most of your leads come inbound, perhaps on the heels of demand gen or digital marketing efforts, your SDR team is probably going to do more qualification unless you might goal them on qualifying opportunities. Whereas if your prospecting efforts are outbound, right, me as an SDR calling you or emailing you, it's probably going to be more meetings or demos.
I'd like to just take a poll, actually, because I know we have a lot of leaders and we have a lot of SDRs and some of us do both, right? So if you just base off of meetings scheduled in more of an outbound capacity, raise your hand, or you do that. Okay, cool. It's good to see the division. And then what about that inbound side of qualification, sales qualified leads or SQOs or whatever you call them? Okay.
It's about half and half.
It's about half and half. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, and just to reiterate on that, at Greenhouse, we do raw opportunities, which is meeting scheduled, and then we see how many of them convert. So we take both into consideration, but the actual goal is based off of the SQO, is the qualified. So just a little insight there. Cool. That's really helpful. And one other thing that this made me think about, when you're thinking about that buyer and how you're prospecting, I like to use the term of looking for triggers, and a lot of people may use this, and if you've never heard that, I think it's a really helpful way. So you're looking for triggers. Wait, what are triggers? C-level executives are moving companies, IPOs, divestitures, M&A activity, anything around the M&A activity. So many different things, and then a lot of other triggers come in depending on the marketplace and the market or the industry that you're working in. So I think that's a fun thing that is a really nice partner to thinking about the actual physical buyers within an organization that you're concentrating on and talking to. So great, good points there. So how do you set that number, right? Like, how do you set that number?
It's a good question. There's probably not an SDR in the world who doesn't want a smaller number. And setting the quota, the number quota, it's toughest at first. There's a couple of different things I would recommend to get to the number. First, you want to think about the size of the market, the size of the territory you're going to give your SDR rep. You want to think what part of your territory you're assigning them to, right? Are they going against the biggest, warmest accounts? Are they going to be calling upon clients that already have a favorable impression of your company, bigger number? Or are they going to be in the colder tail, as we call it, the smaller clients, which might not know of your service, which will probably be a smaller number? The length of the buying process, right? If this is complex, bespoke, customized sales, for instance, enterprise outsourcing solutions that take 2 years to sell, again, probably a smaller number. Short transactional sale, it's going to be a bigger number. So it's one of those things, you're probably going to pick a number at right size, evaluate and reevaluate. And you might also start by looking at an outside salesperson who's particularly fluent in scheduling meetings. And if they spend 20% of their time and they can get 4 meetings, reverse engineer, an SDR rep might start at 20, and then with some expertise work their way to 25. So a number of factors you want to consider. But I think ultimately it's something that you're going to have to measure your progress as you go and then right size if need be.
Yeah, I think it really depends on how your sales organization is set up. I think we were talking about this beforehand of territories. At Greenhouse, our salespeople aren't necessarily aligned by a territory. So it's all to do with the segment size in terms of our employee count. So everybody has a different way that they're measuring this, and we're also thinking about the revenue we need to bring in as an organization. I think that's something that we all need to be really conscious of and think about in this process. Yeah. So a lot of people have a really strong opinion about whether sales development teams report into marketing or sales, right? And I found now leading an entire organization, I feel like I sit right in between, right? My communication with the VP of marketing and my communication with the VP of sales is equal. So what do you guys do here? Brian's sitting on this panel, so I think it's probably pretty clear.
There's a clue. Yeah, it's a question I get a lot, for sure. But I think that you reorient the question from where is the most natural place for them to sit towards where can we find the best manager, the most suitable manager for the team. So where do you have a person with some expertise, some experience, and the interest in the bandwidth to build and scale the team? In our instance, I was reporting into Brian, the VP of Sales, so I had some experience. But more importantly, Brian, coming from CEB, a place that does lead gen or does sales development really well, he had 10 or 12 years of experience watching a high-performing sales development team, so I could lean on his experience. So in our instance, it made the most sense for the SDR team to roll into the VP of Sales. One other rule of thumb, if there's not an obvious person, and I touched on this earlier, but you have a lot of inbound leads and your team's doing a lot of qualifications, it might be easier to sit within marketing for alignment purposes. If it's all outbound prospecting, calls and emails, it might be more natural for sales. But again, I think it's much more important where you have a great person to lead the team.
Great point. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're gonna change veins a little bit and talk about the recruiting aspect. How do you bring these people in? There are a lot of tech software companies here, and we are all probably looking for SDRs, right? We could all probably nod our heads and say yes. So I'll give you one little plug because I do work for Greenhouse Software and say we do applicant tracking, and so we help that interview process because we found that especially millennials and people that are really looking for the best experience possible, it really matters about their experience coming in and interviewing at your organization. So that's my only little plug. But what are you doing to bring in really good talent, and where are you finding them?
Yeah, recruiting is so important. Talent is everything. Of all the ingredients that make for a successful sales development team, if you're missing on any of them, the strategy, training, onboarding, management, etc., your team's not going to live up to its potential. But if you're missing great people, particularly in the beginning, when you're founding the team's almost certainly going to fail. My favorite book on recruiting is written by this guy, Mark Roberge. He scaled the sales team at HubSpot. And he has an interesting quote that resonated with me. He said, as I scaled the sales team at HubSpot and got more data points into what made for a successful sales organization, what I learned was before I had a great training process and managerial process up and running, when I hired great people, they still found a way to win, right? But once I had that infrastructure in place of great training, great onboarding, great management, the best data, the best messaging, when I hired average people, they still found a way to be happy. And so the biggest takeaway there is hiring great people, attracting talent and investing in talent is his number one priority, right? Easy to say, but that should be reflected in your time. As the manager of the team, I need to be invested in attracting great talent. So I think that recruiting is probably the most important part of the job.
Yeah, I agree with that. Awesome. All right, so you've hired the best people in all of New York City now, other than the people at Greenhouse. Yeah. And so now, what are you doing to ramp them up? So what does that onboarding process look like?
Yeah. We typically ramp and onboard over 3 or 4 months. They're going to be, an SDR is going to be running with a fully loaded quota at the latest in month 4. I think the key to training and onboarding is when your new hire walks in on day 1, they have a program sitting on their desk that is their manual for how should they be spending their time, what are their priorities, how fast should they be progressing, etc. We call it a roadmap here at Axiom, and I think it's super important. It illustrates to the SDR what success looks like because they can gauge how they're performing against that roadmap. And I think that a good roadmap is broken into a few different tranches, a few different themes. The first part, call it week 1, is our orientation. And this orientation has 2 different parts, so 2 different focuses during that first week. The first part is becoming fluent in your system and your tools, right? So One of their peer SDRs should run them through the CRM. They probably never used one before. Any sales enablement tools, Tout app, Sales Loft, etc. Prospecting tools, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, the best one on the market. Even Microsoft Outlook. If you're hiring people straight from university like we are, they might have had a Mac that they took the class, right? They've never structured their day around an Outlook calendar, right? So that's the first piece, is gaining some understanding of the systems and tools. The second piece of that orientation week, and I think this is really important and easy to overlook, is meeting all of your colleagues. You're never going to have more time to converse with all of your coworkers in that first week. And it's really important to start to figure out who does what. What are the various roles? What are the various teams? How do those teams liaise with your team, and how do the teams together work toward the bigger picture of, say, revenue growth? Right? And as you start to meet your colleagues, and all of the foreign faces become friendly faces, you become more comfortable, you start to learn who your friends are, who's going to be mentors for you, and who you can go to for what questions. So that's the first piece, call it the first week of our orientation, meeting colleagues, starting to get some understanding of your system and tools. From there, in week 2, we transition to the second piece of the roadmap, which is self-study and certification. Right? This is all about head-down learning and whatever materials that you have available about your business, why it was founded in the first place, what are your services, what are your value propositions, what are your customers, how might you be differentiated, etc. And in addition to this, the second piece of the certification period, as you might imagine, is becoming certified to reach out to clients. And so there's a few main channels that we reach out to clients: LinkedIn InMail and email, and then also phone. With email, the best practice there for a new hire who's training and onboarding is not to reinvent the wheel. Collect templates that have already worked from your peers, right? Assemble a library of, call it a half dozen templates, and then practice tweaking and personalizing those templates to individual prospects, right? Do this exercise with, call it 25 prospects. The SDR sends it to his manager. The manager goes through with a red marker, gives some feedback that's usually pretty consistent. Take out superfluous language, more concise, 150 words or less, should be readable on one mobile phone screen. Orient the message towards what's in it for the client, personalize it to the extent possible, etc. Once the manager feels comfortable that the emails are ready to be client-facing, they are email certified, green lighted to begin emailing clients. Then the second piece is a phone certification process. It's helpful to have call scripting. It's helpful to have a document with the objections the team is currently facing and the best ways to handle it. But the best thing you can do to get up to speed on calling upon clients is to sit in a room and shadow an SDR, right? Because then you start to understand the importance of tonality, the pace with which you talk, slow, right? The confidence, how important that is. And then we do a lot of cold call role plays where someone on my team will call someone internally who acts as if they're a prospect or a client and pitches them on why a meeting would be a good use of their time. This process culminates usually with a phone certification by me or by Bryan, where we act as a very tough client. And if you can schedule a meeting or arouse some curiosity with us, you're then green lighted to begin calling upon clients as well. And when you have the go-ahead for both email and phone, this transitions to the third part of the onboarding roadmap, which is the go-live period. Right? And this go-live period normally looks like this. There's no meeting goal. There's no quota the first month, because the first 3 weeks you're ramping, and the last week you're scheduling for the next month. Then in month 2, you'll probably assume about 40% of your fully loaded quota. So in our case, 6 or 7 meetings. Month 3 would be about 70 or 75% of a fully loaded quota. So again, in our case, about 14 or 15 meetings. And then in month 4, off to the races, 20 meetings or 22 meetings, and you're fully live.
Awesome. I'm really happy to hear about all the onboarding that we had talked about through that. I find the onboarding is such an important part of a sales development's time to really make sure they have all the skill sets that you need. And that certification piece, we do the same thing. So absolutely. I like the email. You go more in depth than we do on emails. And that's actually even something when you're interviewing that is an interesting piece to make sure that you're seeing if they can even write an email. So are you testing them on are they coachable in an interview, and how are you testing them on if they're coachable, and can they write? So that's something to think about even before they get in the door. So yeah, really great points.
There you go. Just add with the onboarding process, it is very much a team effort. It's not just the manager and the sales development rep, it's their colleagues in sales development and on the sales team who are reviewing emails, practicing, role playing, a lot of different voices and input into that process, which is really key.
Right, and people do onboarding in a lot of different ways, and I think you guys have hit the nail on the head for your size and the size of the team especially. As we've gotten a lot bigger, it's a lot more structured, and there's a devoted trainer, and it looks a little bit more like a university certification program that you have branded, and you can do a lot of different things with that. So there is no right or wrong, and I think you guys have really done a great job where the size that you're in and how to scale that, even cross cities. So yeah, nice job there. All right, so we got through ramping, right? Or did we talk through ramping? Are we next up? All right, so when we talk about ramping, what are some of the top attributes? Are we all? No.
We can talk about that though. I'll speak
Okay.
about that.
All right, so still on recruiting, yeah.
So we're jumping back a step, looking back at recruiting.
All right, we got off on our onboarding
We got off on an onboarding
tangent. It's just so easy. We all love onboarding so much.
It's so much fun.
All right, so you're hiring recent grads. Where do you find them?
Yeah, so we are lucky in that there's a couple inherent advantage that I have to play with. First, we have a world-class internal recruiting team. I'm looking for them so I can embarrass them, but I don't see them. John Urban and Charlotte Cole. There's John. I don't know where Charlotte is. Charlotte's in the back. So that's really helpful. We also have a business model that is sexy to millennials, right? We're venture-backed, we're growth stage. It's a true disruptive innovator. We have a great culture, we have this space. So it makes our lives easier, and it allows us to get great candidates. And so we're looking at top schools. We have multiple people from Harvard, we have multiple people from Vanderbilt, we have multiple people from Middlebury. There's a lot of diversity, but the common theme is we're getting them from top schools. Let's go to qualifications. One thing I would add to that, one of the things that I think has been a really big success story for us and has allowed us to get some top candidates is starting this summer, we've implemented an intern program as a feeder to the SDR team. There's a few different reasons why I think it's worth your while to invest in an intern program. The first is the interns motivated to earn themselves a full-time job are going to add some value. Our interns own a quota, and they had a meeting goal to hit this summer. I believe they're in week 8 right now of a 10-week program. All of them have already surpassed their goal, so they're really adding value. The second benefit, the second reason why I think an intern program is worth exploring, as you scale an SDR team, at some point, there's going to be too many people for me, the manager, to manage myself. That could be 6 people, or 8 people, or 10 people. But I need, or any SDR manager needs to start thinking about incubating a layer of management beneath. And managing interns is a great way to get experience and get reps coaching someone. So for future managers for my team, it was a really good experience for them. But the third reason, this ties back into recruiting and getting top talent. If you have interns that come in and prove themselves and seem like a great fit and want to come back to your company, it's next year's talent, it's next year's pipeline for talent. It's next year's hires. But not only that, it's hires that you feel good about because you've seen them in action for 10 weeks, not just through a short interview process. Right? You've seen if they're cultural fits. You've seen how they interact with outside sales. And then when they do come back, they come back more or less ramped up because they've already had 10 weeks or 3 months of experience. So that's something that has been a really big hit for us this summer. As I mentioned with the interns, it allows you to really evaluate if they have the attributes that you're looking for. And I think defining what attributes you look for when you hire SDRs is really critical. And this is the hardest when you're first scaling the team, because you don't have a bunch of data points as to what makes for a great SDR. That becomes proprietary knowledge, that formula. This is what allowed so-and-so to succeed. This is what's driven so-and-so's success. As the team is scaled though, and we've got more information about what makes for a winning SDR, we've identified through a laundry list of helpful attributes, 5 things that I think are really key for success in this role. The first thing, and the most important thing by far, is just drive. We call it sales motor. It's people that work with a sense of urgency. People that push themselves every day, whether they're ahead of goal, whether they're behind goal. It's probably the same driver of success for outside sales. The easiest way to win as an SDR, really high inputs, work really hard, tons of good emails, tons of good phone calls. To some extent, it's a numbers game, right? You got to kiss a lot of frogs, as I like to say. So that's the first thing, is driver sales motor. The next thing that I'm always testing for is coachability. It's really hard if you're not coachable. It's really hard if you're not open to feedback. And the people that are most receptive to feedback, they ramp the most quickly. They get better the fastest. They go on the fastest trajectory. And you can test for this through what we call the absorb and apply test. Do it in the interview process. A candidate you're interviewing, have him pitch you on your service, or have her tell you about her prospects or your clients. Give them some feedback. The next person that interviews them, have them ask the same question. Did it hit home? Right?
Yeah.
The third thing, this one's probably the most obvious, it's confidence. We're calling upon really senior people at really big companies. If the confidence is not there, they don't stand a chance. Right? Unfortunately, confidence is the easiest one to test. An interview is relatively high stress, so you're going to see if the person is composed. Part of that interview process should be conducted on the phone, so you hear what they sound like on the phone. Ask them tough questions. Do they remain poised? Right? So confidence is a big one. The fourth one is curiosity. So not just smarts, not just intellectual horsepower, but intellectual curiosity. The people that want to learn more about your business, why the business started in the first place, about your customers, etc. The curious people ask the best questions. They're probably going to ask the best questions at the interview, so you're going to be able to gauge for that. And the curious people make for the best researchers. And part of life as an SDR is being a detective and finding what are the right companies for us right now, what are the right people within those companies, what current events are changing that landscape and introducing new companies that might derive value from our services. So that curiosity piece is a really critical one for us. And then finally, and this one's tough, but I'll categorize it as sales DNA or entrepreneurial instincts. There's a lot of judgment calls an SDR has to make that really stem from his or her instincts. For instance, if an SDR calls me a prospect and gets me on the phone, and he or she has a good hypothesis as to why they can add value for me, but I don't really seem interested. When do they pivot, or when do they push back upon me and say, with all due respect, I think this is going to be valuable for you to carve out time, let me tell you why. Or when do they get the sense that this might be a value add to me, but the timing doesn't seem right, so is it okay if I circle back with you next quarter? Or when do they recognize that they were wrong, this is not going to be something I'm ever interested in? So instead they ask, is there anyone in your network that you think could find value in my service? Is there another colleague at your company you would point me to? So entrepreneurial instincts or sales DNA. Those 5 things we always want to test for and feel really good about. And then there's a couple other quick things I would highlight. Cultural fit. Do they exhibit your core values? And then do you imagine they're going to have a good working relationship with the outside salesperson, inside salesperson, or account exec that they support? Yeah, but those are the qualities that we prioritize.
Awesome. Great. Really in depth there. Okay. So let's go into compensation.
Right.
All right. We're cruising. So, compensation. Everyone wants to get paid, including SDRs. How do you comp them on the work that they do?
Yeah. Compensation is really important. It focuses people, it motivates people. We love a lot of compensation. At Axiom, we believe in a pretty strong base salary with a variable component or a bonus on top of the base. Our bonus is 34%. But there's a few things that I would suggest keeping in mind as you design your comp plan. The most important thing when it comes to comp and SDRs is keep it simple. The simpleness gives clarity, the clarity gives focus. Trust me on this, keep it simple. If your SDR cannot explain to me, the manager, in 2 sentences how they're goaled, the comp plan is broken. In our case, 60 meetings completed a day scheduled per quarter. So it's a good segue to the second thing. Keep it simple. The second thing is, at what frequency do you bonus them? And there's a balance to strike here. If you bonus them annually, if they're way ahead of plan, do they take their foot off the gas? If they're way behind, do they throw in the towel? And a carrot 9 months from now is not as motivating as a carrot 2 months from now. And plus the time value of money, they're not going to make as much money. The second thing is the frequency with which you bonus them. I'll also add, I don't think that you want to bonus them monthly. Well, it's going to be burdensome on your comp and benefits team to pay them every month. Well, life as an SDR is very cyclical. There's a lot of ups and downs. Some weeks, even if the inputs are good, a lot of good emails, a lot of good phone calls, the results just aren't going to be there. They might go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday without being able to originate any pipeline. No meetings, no qualified opportunities. And then Thursday of that same week, they might get 4 meetings or 4 qualified opportunities. So you want the time to be long enough that that episodic nature balances out. So for us, the sweet spot is bonusing quarterly. The last thing I think you want to think about in the comp plan is what percentage of their bonus is directly tied to just things they can control, so meeting scheduled or qualified opportunities they've procured, and what percent is tied to overall revenue of the business. And again, I think there's a balance. 80-20 is probably pretty good. 80% tied to their results, 20% tied to the business. The 20% that's tied to the overall revenue is helpful because it's some type of quality assurance. They're going to want to be putting good leads in the top of the funnel when it affects how they're paid. But if too much of their comp plan is overall revenue, it seems a little out of their control. They could send an AE on a great meeting. If the AE drops the ball, they get penalized. It doesn't feel great. Also, if it's a really long sales cycle, they tee up an opportunity that closes 2 years later. Are they waiting 2 years? And also, if you're just going them on revenue, you're going to incentivize your SDRs to essentially turn into mini sales admins because they're going to follow the leads down the sales funnel with the account exec because they're going to want it to close, whether that's doing back office stuff or follow up with the client. And the AE might like having a personal assistant in the process. But if that's what your SDRs are doing, what they're not doing is originating pipeline, which is what you want them to be doing. So that's the way that we think about comp, and I think that those are the 3 most important things.
Nice. And I'm sure lots of people have different. I think mine definitely sounds completely different than that. I appreciate those comments so much. We're on monthly, and depending on the ladders and where you are in your career as an SDR, it depends on how much your base is, what that compensation plan looks like, and then by the time you get to a senior, I think this is a little bit of a tweak that I think is interesting that you guys might like to hear as a different perspective is That we don't tie it to overall revenue. I'm measured on that. But my team is like very disconnected to that. I don't think they can really influence. They don't feel that influence. As they get to an SDR 3 in our ladders, and it has nothing to do with inbound versus outbound, and I can tell you guys about that some later time. They get 2% of the deals that close while they're in SDR 3. So they are dying to get to that place, right? So they are doing everything in their power to get a little thing, and they could get it. You're not going to know if something's going to necessarily close when you're in SDR 3 or not. So that's a little bit out of their control. But it's nice that they are, throughout their time as an SDR, they're trying to set up ops, right? And they just want them to close. And if it closes when they're in SDR 3, they're getting paid for that. So it's a little counter piece. Cool. Awesome. All right. So talking about meetings, you're talking about the relationship with AEs. So let's talk about the partnership that your SDRs have with the account executives. You talked a little bit about that in your onboarding training. So yeah, how do they interact?
Super important, super important. What has been interesting to me as this team has scaled is going from one person to 12 here in New York and 20 globally. So many aspects of our lead gen or SDR program have changed. Things evolve. And I'm constantly at least trying to evaluate and reevaluate territories, messaging, quotas, etc. But there's been a couple things that have remained constant and will continue to persist because I think that they are the core tenets of the success of our team. Right, the first thing is the mission of our team. Right? Build consistent pipeline, a high quantity of high quality meetings. The second thing that is a mainstay I talk about is the importance of recruiting great people. The third thing that we emphasize, and I will, the day I die, continue to emphasize, is the importance of that partnership with outside sales. If your SDR and your account exec are not synced, they're not in alignment, things are going to fall down. Things are going to fall down. So I think the best practice there is for a weekly sync, a weekly one-on-one with the SDR and the outside salesperson, the account exec that they support, that they're originating opportunities for. During that meeting, the SDR and the outside salesperson should align on who am I targeting. I reached out to these 8 companies last week. Of those 8 companies, I'm rolling 7 of them to this week, and here's why. Right? Here are the people that I was able to schedule a meeting with. Here are the people that were radio silent. Here are the people that said they weren't interested. Here's what I learned. Of the people that are radio silent, here's who I'm rolling over to this week. To replenish my prospecting list with the people that I'm going to discontinue reaching out to, here are a couple companies that I suggest we could add. Does that align with your expectations? Or what companies would you like me to focus on this week? And what people within those companies? This is where you get a lot of the quality control. Because your outside salespeople, your AEs are going to want to go on the meetings that they think have the best chance of converting from meeting or introductory conversation to qualified lead. Also, it's a good chance to sync and practice on the messaging. For instance, an SDR would say, here are a couple of CPG companies or life sciences companies that I'm reaching out to. This is generally how I'm thinking about articulating value for the client. What would you do differently? Or what current events could inspire us to change our messaging to personalize it? And then the third piece of this weekly sync is feedback. What could the SDR do better for the outside salesperson?
Yeah.
So I think that partnership is critically important. And I think that a weekly cadence might feel like a lot initially to an outside salesperson, but invest in the SDR and give them that coaching and that guidance and feedback, and you're going to reap the benefits because you're going to go on better meetings because of it. We have a couple of account execs or outside salespeople here at Axiom that are particularly good at this partnership. We have a business team we call CNI, and the leader of that team, Aaron Payne. The other leader of that team, Sarah Rockheim. Also Joe Zimmering. They're really good at coaching and leading the SDRs. And the SDRs thrive when they support that practice. It's no coincidence. Same thing in our DC market. Nicole Carter, Courtney Fletcher are really invested in their SDRs. And the SDRs kick ass that work for them. There's a direct correlation there. So I think that partnership is really, really important.
I actually think it's a weekly thing, but it's a daily interaction. We have the benefit of being co-located with them, but even without it, it's real-time feedback on helping with objection handling, this contact feedback instead of this. It's a continuous conversation throughout the week. Yeah, you have that one weekly get-together, but our top salespeople are available to respond and help their SDRs as needed. And they want to do well for you as a result.
Yeah. I think a big thing is a lot of people don't have that 1-to-1 ratio, right? So this is scaling your team. So a lot of people have a lot less SDRs than they do account executives. So I think a nice thing to partner with what you're saying is even if they're supporting 2 AEs to 1 SDR, that just makes them even better as long as those 2 people are really invested because you're working with 2 completely different personalities. So you're learning about the styles of those different types of sellers and the different types of people that you would be working with. Which is really nice, especially if you have less sales development reps than you do account executives. Yeah, wonderful. So, of course, as a VP of sales, I'm sure other than revenue, you care about best practices that your AEs are making, and that relationship's really important. What's one of the other main things that most VPs of sales say their account executives never do this quite enough?
Well, I mean, I think ours do a pretty good job with it, and that is, supporting the SDR team, feeding new prospects into the top of the funnel, and owning part of that number.
Okay.
So we actually ask our AEs to own about 20% of their monthly meeting target each month, and the SDR team handles the other 80%. Keeps them invested in the funnel and what's going on in their territory. They're leading by example. It's much easier to give performance feedback when you're actually doing it as well yourself, right? Walk the walk as well as talk the talk. And I think it's just motivating for the SDR to see, oh wow, my account exec just scheduled 5 meetings. I'm on 1 full sheet. What's going on here? So that's the piece that I'm always pushing them on more of. It just really helps the whole engine run more efficiently.
The 2 points that I would add to that too. Reasons why you want your AEs to still have skin in the game as far as originating meetings or qualifying opportunities. There are some clients, inevitably, where it's going to make more sense for that ping, the phone call or the email to come from the account exec who already has the relationship in place. Or it might be a really high profile client, a really senior person. We sell to senior legal officers at the biggest companies in the world. The senior most person often has the title of chief legal officer or general counsel. The person who contacts them is usually an outside salesperson. And the second thing is, you want your outside salespeople to be able to originate pipeline, because sometimes they're going to have to pitch in and spend more of their time scheduling meetings. For instance, if there's attrition, or I reallocate a resource that was helping their team. So you don't want them to lose that muscle memory.
Yeah, awesome. I think of it in an organization depending how many buyers or prospects you're looking at in a given company, right? Your account executive will oftentimes go top down and the SDR goes bottom up, and you meet somewhere in the middle and you figure out what that looks like. And then you think of how do you break out a target account list or a prospecting list that the account executive is responsible for, whether that be territory or some prescribed list by vertical. And so with that, also I've seen people do like ABCD and kind of decide, okay, I'm going to stick with the A's. You got my B's through my D's, right? In terms of like the quality of those accounts and the relationship that they want to have. So other little thoughts to add in there. Cool. All right. So, and then we're good on the prospecting AEs piece. Is there any on this is a great one. Yes. How are they expected to find the time to do the prospecting? And what have you guys done to make it fun?
So how do our account execs carve out the time to do origination of their own?
Yeah, that 20%.
It's a good question because the outside salespeople are always going to be focused on closing business, as they should. That's the fastest path to realizing revenue. So we put a structure in place where every Wednesday evening we have what we call the call blitz from 5:15 to 6 p.m., which is one of our strongest call windows. And during this period, account execs and SDRs alike are all on the phone calling upon prospects.
I love this. This is so cool.
And so it focuses everyone and it sets the expectation that during this period, people are building pipeline, originating opportunities. And we make it fun. My longest tenured lead gen rep, Axiom sitting in the back here, runs the call blitz and does a great job doing it. He'll give us something of a pre-game pump-up talk before the call blitz, which is motivating and humorous, I would also say. As meetings are scheduled over this 45-minute window, we have an email chain where we reply, got one, as in I gotta win, I got a meeting scheduled. So we celebrate it in real time. I become the cheerleader during this 45-minute window. So it focuses the account execs that window is when everyone is focused on pipeline building. And it moves the needle, it makes an impact. We've had months where we've had 50 of our meetings scheduled against a goal of about 100 occur during that Wednesday evening call list. So it's been a fun way for us to really make an impact on our efforts to build pipeline. So yeah.
I think that is so cool. I haven't seen that. I think everyone struggles with power hours or call blitzes or something. You're like, no one picks up the phone. Like, they become, or you do them every day and then no one actually ever picks up the phone. So I think a lot of us, I've had to kind of redefine what a power hour looks like and how we're going to go about doing them. And this is such a great way because the account executives are so invested and again, it encourages best practices with them and the SDRs get to hear them on the phone. And having that consistent, like learning from people and hearing what other people are saying, the reason why I've created a lot of the talk tracks around the software that I've sold is because of what I've heard from other people. And so you have to have that environment where people are comfortable and you can start speaking like other people speak that you think mirror how you talk about products and value and services.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a great learning opportunity too.
Yeah. For
someone who's ramping or onboarding, to have the ability to observe and listen to multiple different people calling, it's totally useful, really useful.
Great. All right, we're going to go to one more section. So really, this is on your retention. So what's next, right? They're SDRs. How long are they in that role, and how do they get into that next? What does their career ladder look like?
Yeah. So I'll tackle those in turn with the second question first. What's the expected tenure for an SDR? As I mentioned earlier, we hire straight from undergrad. And we hope to have an SDR or a lead gen rep in seat between 18 and 24 months with opportunities for advancement, opportunities for promotion, and a comp boost built in from SDR analyst to associate. And now we're actually going to build in another layer of senior associate. But the goal is to have people in seat 18 months or 2 years. The longer they're in seat, the more production you're going to get from them, right?
Yeah.
But also, when someone has proven themselves and has been delivering high-quality pipeline over a period of time and is ready to take on more responsibility and have a bigger impact to the business, you want them to do so, right? Graduates, as I call it, of the program, are a really healthy thing. Something that current SDRs can strive to do, people they can look up to, and then something that you can emphasize when you're showing candidates on joining your team. The key to retention is career pathing.
Yeah.
And I think that the key to career pathing is, as a manager, spending the time to really figure out what motivates the person on your team, what's their skill sets, what's their interests, how might those things intersect with business opportunities. And I think the right cadence is, if not quarterly, at least twice a year, where I want to check in with people on my team and gauge how are they progressing and what opportunities down the line at Axiom are intriguing to them. And it's my job as a manager, and one of my favorite parts as a manager is to think through career pathing the people on my team. But it's also on the SDR, or anyone for that matter, to manage their career. A piece of advice I got shortly after I started from a former colleague, David Armstrong. I love this quote. He says, "The key to my career is heads down, eyes up." Head down, focused on what's really important, my business objectives, crushing my number, internal relationship. But eyes up, always scanning for opportunities, business opportunities that would be a good match with my skill set and my interests. The other thing that I'll note with career pathing is I don't think that it's one size fits all. Yes, you're going to have the traditional ladder from SDR to associate SDR to inside sales, junior account exec, SME account exec, senior account exec, and that path will be great for a lot of people. It might be great for half of your SDR team, but it's not going to be for everyone. There's probably going to be opportunities outside of SDR to outside sales. For instance, 2 people on my team aspire to be managers, and they're going to be really good managers. So we're going to figure out a way for them to begin the managerial career coaching SDRs. Someone on my team is going to be shifting focuses to a different team and helping to support the pipeline origination efforts for a different service, one of our fastest growing services. And so there are probably different channels, even within your own business. And I think that you want to articulate to the SDR that there's a number of options for advancement.
Yeah, that's something we do when, like, within their first week as an SDR is a little bit, we do an SDR history lesson. Like, here's where we started, here's where we are now, because it's changed, right? And like, if you've been in this kind of role for a while, you've been the one to change it, because you've seen what worked, you've seen what didn't work. And so really, that's a great piece. I don't know, I kind of lost it.
How are you on time?
We are basically done. So with that, yeah, I think that's really everything on career path. I'm trying to think if there's other, just like making them see a map of what that could look like, where it doesn't feel like this very linear space, and showing them that they can go into customer support or any other department within the organization is huge. And using a team lead role, not as I need help, but you still want to be an AE, that can be a training ground to become an SDR manager. And so that was one thing. Recently, we redefined what that looks like. 75% doing the job of a sales development rep, and then 25% is working with and coaching our people that are ramping and are going through that experience as a new hire. So awesome, Kyle. That was phenomenal. You hit almost every single thing that I think someone would want to hear out of a presentation like this. So thank you, and Bryan, thanks for the support. We do have 15 minutes for questions. Yeah, so my one ask on the questions, I'm pretty strict on questions, but I'll tell you why, is if it feels like a question that's just a question for you and it's for just one of us, ask us afterwards. But if it is something that applies to everybody, please.
You repeat the question.
Oh yeah, and I'll repeat the question before the answer so that the video can see it. Yeah, perfect. So sorry, I'm gonna go in order of the hands I saw. Cool. Yes.
If somebody needs email versus phone call.
The cadence?
Well, that's right. What works, have you changed the cadence, more phone calls, more emails, that doesn't depend on what you can tell.
Yeah, so that is like a whole one of these conversation discussions, but I love that one. So, yeah, what do you guys do in terms of email call?
Yeah,
ratio?
we describe our outreach approach as multi-touch and multi-channel. Multi-touch meaning it's a series of client pings, phone calls, emails, voicemails, LinkedIn connections that ultimately lead to the introduction. And multi-channel being you leverage all of phone, all of email, and LinkedIn. I think that you want to try them all and you want to have your ping cycle incorporate all three elements. Why? Because some people are only going to be responding via email. Some people are so inundated with emails, they're never going to read it. You have to catch them on the phone. And for some people, you're going to struggle with both of those channels, but they don't get many LinkedIn email messages, or maybe they're intrigued as to why you connected with them, so you might have success doing that. So I advise my team that their ping cycle should include elements from all three. Where you get into trouble is someone who's having success just via email, is having a lot of success via LinkedIn email, and therefore says, playing to my strengths means I'm not on the phone, right? That's where you get into trouble. Within all three, this is old-fashioned, but phone is your best bet if you can get a client on the phone. It's the most efficient. You can objection handle on the phone. If someone's not interested, why are you not interested? Let me tell you why you should be interested. And to the extent that someone does say yes, I'm curious and I'm interested to learn more, you can schedule the introduction then and there. Great, really looking forward to meeting you. This week is crazy for us. But the latter half of next week looks good. Do you have any availability on Thursday and Friday? Thursday's no good. Friday morning, 10 a.m.? All right, great. Confirm your email, confirm your address or your phone number, send the calendar invite right now. And you avoid the email game of someone responds to your email, sure, I'm happy to meet with you. Then you send them times. Okay, then they didn't respond. Email them again, then they copy their assistant. Now you're trying to call the assistant. And so phone is the most efficient vehicle if you can catch them. But I think that the approach should include elements of all three.
Yeah. And some of the typical stats around that is like a minimum of 8 touches and whatever that, through those cadences. We find, I've been kind of building out cadences. We're about to move to Sales Loft Cadence, which is a program. I hope there aren't any other programs out there that other people hear from. But yeah, so we're building out, and I've created some of them that are 13 steps, and that includes some emails and some calls and some voicemails. And I love double dials. So you call them and they call them again, or a ghost call. A lot of people call them, so it's another little tip strategy there.
Oh yeah, one thing that I'll add to that really quickly. If you can't get someone on the phone, call them back with your cell phone or star 67. Or there's actually now an app that we have, and
Now they're never going to take our place.
now they're never going to take my phone. There's apps where they give you free numbers from your cell phone. So you can call from different numbers from your cell phone. So something to experiment with.
Next question in the back, yeah.
Yeah, thanks to you both for sharing these insights. I think they're great, and really Kyle, the characteristics that you talked about
Yeah.
were spot on, so that was great. My question, I have 2 questions if you don't mind, very quick. The first is around recruiting. You mentioned that you have 12 SDRs in the US and 20 globally. What are your thoughts on remote SDRs? And then, Bryan, question for you. What is the biggest disconnect or challenge you're hearing from your sales team about the SDRs?
Yeah. I'll start with the first. I'm going to be fast. It's 20 globally, but it's 12 here. I hate remote SDRs. I can't stand it.
Not the people.
Not the people, the concept. I can't stand it. If you're a remote SDR, you can't observe the best practices in real time from the rest of the team. When you build an SDR team, there's network effects. As the team grows, you get better because you can pick up on the best practices from everyone on the team. And me as the manager, I can say, this is something great that person A was doing, person B could benefit from this. And then 2 people or 3 people can go into one of our conference rooms, dial together and learn from one another. If you're a remote SDR, you're on an island and you're disconnected from those learnings. So I'm not a fan of the remote.
I think with the remote model, it puts just incredible pressure on the talent itself, the person itself.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're looking for great talent, but they lose all of the benefit of scale and all the energy that you have with the team here. So.
And the manager, right? Like, think about the manager's capacity. That's
It's
the
hard for
biggest
me.
thing. It's really tough to manage
It's hard
those
for me.
external people. Yeah. And then the other
And then was it frustrations, I think was the question.
Or the disconnects that your sales teams.
the quality of the meeting, who they're reaching out to. And I think you see that breakdown when that partnership isn't close. If they're not syncing with their SDRs regularly, they're probably getting meetings on their calendar that they don't want or didn't approve or just not all that excited about. They're frustrated. You see that less when there's that regular communication, the weekly sync, the daily communication. They're getting the meetings that they wanted, approved of, and are excited about.
Mark, Jacob, Leo, and then this side. Cool. Okay, we're gonna do this.
Question as well, but so you were here for 5 years before you actually built the team. You came to learn with a team. Other people have that team. So why was it so hard, or what actually turned the dial?
Good question.
Mark and I worked together at CB for many years, so it's a loaded question. But it was really about, and I think, useful for other organizations, the organization being ready for this. When I joined Axiom 7 years ago, we didn't even call it sales. In much, CB was very similar. So the organization really evolved over the last 7 years, and I think started to embrace and adopt more traditional B2B sales processes, roles, etc. And it coincided with the growth that we were seeing as an organization. As we look to fuel the future growth, we decided, okay, we need to kind of supercharge that through specialization, as Kyle talked about. And we started with the sales development team. That was the first sales function that we really specialized. But it was really a matter of the organization just wasn't there yet. There wasn't buy-in from senior management before then. That took some time, some education of senior leaders about how important it was. And then a pilot here in New York, quite frankly, to prove it out. And then from there, it just kind of exploded.
Jacob.
So my SDR team, we are not segmented. We're not like partnered with one AE.
Yeah.
Or the sprinkler system.
Yeah.
There are certain SDRs on my team that just happen to find the largest deals consistently. So my question is, do you think there's like a chance of like causing some resentment amongst the sales team if a certain AE is paired with a certain really strong SDR? And what are the pros and cons of that?
I'll take that question. It's a hard transition. You already have the sprinkler system in place. And so you have to transition to our alignment model of SDR to AE, which we didn't have to do because we built out the team with that alignment in place. Will there be animosity? Probably, because there's probably already visibility as to who the best SDRs and who they are.
So this is my thought, right? So if you think about segmenting, so you're maybe segmenting by SMB, mid-market, enterprise, possibly?
Our AEs are segmented. Our
Okay,
SDRs are
AEs, right. So if you can take those AEs, segment SDRs, and create pods. So you create an AE pod. AEs are tied, say you have 3 enterprise sales reps. 2 SDRs support those 3, but it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. I think that's a really nice way to start tying that. So those 2 or 3 SDRs that are supporting those 3 to 5 AEs, it's round robin within those smaller segments. And then instead of having a lot of one-on-one conversations, you have these small group pod conversations. And that are all, because then again, you're getting the opportunity to work with a bunch of different types of account executives. And then the AEs, if one SDR is better than the other, they're getting a mix of those. So separating your SDRs in terms of strengths.
The benefits to your model is if you're aligning SDRs by region and you have a particularly warm region, there's going to be jealousy amongst the SDRs that so-and-so has New York City where our brand is the strongest. Right? So you avoid that problem with the sprinkler system, but overall I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of it.
Last question. I'm sorry, guys, over here. I have to go to him. He raised his hand first. Leo, yes.
Would you mind, you mentioned the 5 things you look for while interviewing a candidate. Could you go a little bit more tactical on your interview process? How are you really isolating? How many people are you looking for to interview? How many do you typically make it through your process? How are you actually filtering out for these behaviors? Are 3 people interviewing it over a week, etc.?
Good question. Good question.
That's a really
I'll be
good
quick.
question.
I'll be quick.
Okay, all right.
The first thing is we're continually sourcing. We have an internal recruiter, Charlotte, she's sitting here somewhere, which is consistently bringing us talent. The interview process starts with a screening call. We're within 20 minutes trying to gauge for those qualities. We then bring the person in for a live interview round, and there's instruction to all the people interviewing the candidate to evaluate for one of those things. So Charlotte, my internal recruiter, gives instruction to so-and-so account executive or so-and-so whomever at Axiom, this is what I want you to test for and this is how we do it. After the live interview round, we administer a case study where a candidate emails me as a prospect with the hopes of scheduling a meeting. I email them back and say, it sounds interesting, I've heard good things about Axiom, not sure this is going to be a great use of my time, let's quickly hop on the phone. And then they get on the phone with me and pitch me on the company, handle my objections, and see if they can schedule a meeting.
Your company? Or what are they pitching?
It's actually a made-up company.
Oh, okay.
It's a made-up company. And so through that three-step process of screening calls to the live interview round with individual people testing for those individual attributes, then to the case study is where we try to really gauge those attributes.
You just pitched Greenhouse for me, so. But that was beautiful. That was so good. Awesome. Cool. So I definitely want to get to your questions. If you want to ask us maybe afterwards, that would be awesome. We're happy to answer them one off. But we don't want to keep you guys here long. You guys have been an incredible audience. And I hope, again, you all took away some really good things from this. And we hope to see you back. I think, yeah. So we'll end on that. Thanks, Axiom.